well as we look out there, because these calf prices are going to be very strong. But here's my forecast on supplies. The light blue is this year. We did have the third quarter down relative to a year ago, and we kept running it up as we kept these placements higher. But look what happens in the fourth quarter, and then look at the maroon colored ones relative to this year all the way through next year. 4 and 5% reductions in cattle supplies, and I think we're going to have very strong prices. Now, to say we're going to have strong prices from where we are is like making the best better. I mean, we're up here at $190, some $175, $180 on choice beef cutouts. If you look at that, if you go, it doesn't take much. I said several months ago we're going to have $200 choice beef. Well, it doesn't take much to get there from here, and I think we're going to see that as we go through the winter months. We look at cattle prices. Of course, they backed off a little in the summer, but that's not a real surprise. I think we'll see some gradual climb in the year end here on these fed cattle prices, back up in the $115 to $120 range. Forecast for cattle as we go through the rest of the year, feds in the mid-teens on average for the quarters. You're going to have some $120 cattle in the fourth quarter, I think. Then next year, a bit higher. Notice the relationships of these percentage change numbers. Very little percent change in rib production, huge increases in prices. Very strong demand. I mean, demand has been excellent, driven largely by exports this year. Next year, you're going to have some reductions and maybe not quite as large gains on prices from these levels. But here's kind of an annual look at these cattle with 5-weight cattle averaging near $1.50 next year. You're going to have some of these 4-weight calves that are probably going to be up around $2. If you look at 700 to 800 feeders, $135, and then fed steers in the $115 to $120 range. So higher beef prices, higher chicken prices. So what does that mean for pork? Well, the June hogs and pigs report said that we were just about very close to where we were a year ago. The numbers were a little larger than were expected. Slight growth in the breeding herd. I'm not real sure that's going on, but it's close enough a year ago that we're not going to argue. The numbers that were kind of impressive here, of course, was an average litter size of 10. That's the first time we've ever gotten to 10 pigs saved per litter in a quarter. 2% growth, again, on litter size. The numbers for farrowing intentions were a little bit of cause concern for me. I think they're a little low, but still kind of a steady-as-she-goes situation for the pork industry from a supply standpoint, but growth of productivity. One of the things that may be driving this, and it's hard to quantify, but we have a lot of systems that are putting in some filtration systems to try to control PRRS and being pretty successful at that. I was with a veterinary clinic yesterday that works in Minnesota, and they've got some counties that they're kind of eliminating PRRS from those counties in a very systematic way. It's not going to be the shock of the circovirus vaccine like it was in 2008 when it all came at once, but we're going to see some productivity increases just from some disease control, as well as the situation that we're in the sow market, where we sell a 500-pound sow. We can buy one of Pillen's really good gilts and still put $100 in our pocket. Okay, there's a strong incentive to roll these. Okay, you can buy one of Pillen's not so good gilts too to do the same thing. But you don't sell any of those, do you? Oh, excuse me. That's the other guys. Okay. Anyway, the point is the economics are really encouraging rolling the sow herds. And when you do that, you keep them young, and you get the genetic progress of those gilts in this mix quickly and rolled into this thing. So I don't think we're at any stretch to keep this 2% growth rate up, especially when we consider that the Danes raised 12 pigs per sow. I mean, we've got lots of room for improvement. We pat ourselves on the back for that 10, but we can sure grow some more. What does the report mean for slaughter? The red is my forecast for weekly slaughter for the rest of this year. You can see we've been very close, within 0.5%. The actuals here just since June 1st when the report, the inventory count was made. The only real difference in weekly slaughter flows would be out here in the third and fourth quarter. Last year, we still had pigs eating lousy 2009 corn as late as September, and they weren't growing very well, and then they really grew fast, and so there's a little bit of difference in the year-over-year change there, but slightly larger slaughters here in the third quarter, slightly lower in the fourth quarter is what I'm looking for. Of course, the big thing, I think, in the pig market the last few weeks has been this plunge in weights, and driven by heat, driven by markets. I think we're extremely current in marketing right now. A lot of things, factors that come into this, but we've had a dramatic drop in weights. Now, I'll point out, I use the weights from mandatory price supporting barrels and gilts here. I think it's the best measure we have because it's reported daily. It's a real-time measure. It is just top barrels and gilts. It doesn't get kind of muddied up by off hogs or by breeding stock or anything else. And so I think it's the best measure of how current we are. When you get this kind of plunge, I mean, you're trying to really chase pigs kind of deep into the distribution that are in those barns. The question is, what's going to happen as we go into the fall? Well, cool weather, fresh corn, we'll get some higher growth rates, but we're not going back to 207 and 8 pounds, I don't think, this fall, especially from where we are now. So we're going to take a little bit of pork out of the supply because of weights, maybe a couple of pounds per carcass there as we go through the fall, but a tremendous drop in those weights just in the last few weeks. Pork production running still above a year ago by 1.4%, but we've gotten very close to those levels of a year ago recently. Now, I've got this red arrow on here, and I put it on there to make a point. Anytime you look at the last 2 weeks of data from USDA, you always need to remember those are estimates. And they're not really hard data, they're estimates, they do the best they can, well, maybe. But the point is that one, that data point that I've got the arrow pointing to, its original estimate was there. It was 410 or 11, and the actual data comes in at 387. And lots of times USDA gets into this situation where they just systematically over or underestimate, and then 2 weeks hence, they adjust them downward. And they did that with both of these data points. They were way up here. The week after the 4th was almost to 420. My expectation is these last 2 data points, they're going to adjust down pretty sharply as well when the actual data comes out. So these production estimates for 2 weeks in arrears are running way high relative to what the final estimates are coming out. And it looks to me like they're not watching their own weight data very closely. And I thought that for several weeks, and then, boy, this week that was a huge reduction down. So I think these production numbers are running lower than a year ago, and because of what's going on with weights, are going to continue to do so, given that we're not going to have very much higher slaughter. Of course, the news is record high cutout values, driven by lower weights, somewhat lower hog numbers, and very good demand. China is, everything, all the reports are they're in the market. We'll find out how much they were in the market in 2 months when we get the export data. So we don't know that on a real-time basis, but record high cutouts, that's translated into record high hog prices last week as well. I did not think we would take these June highs out, given that this year. I didn't think we'd take them out as a seasonal high. I don't know how much steam is left in the hog market, but when you start getting $105 and $6 hogs, it's hard for me to make the argument that you're going up very much. And so I would think kind of a sideways move here through August, and then seasonally lower, but it could be a pretty reasonable kind of seasonal break this year. Sow slaughter was somewhat larger than a year ago for most of the summer, and we've got back to those kind of last year's sow slaughter rates in the recent weeks. I think the driver there was a high degree of uncertainty about what the corn crop and feed costs were going to be looking forward. While that is certainly not gone, we are to August now, and we do have a corn crop. It may not be a 13.2 or 3 billion bushel corn crop, but it's not a 12 either. And I think we're pretty safe on that. And I think we've had some people probably move back into maybe some expansion modes and looking to put a few more sows down. From a profit standpoint, the futures market day before yesterday offering somewhere $4 to $5, depending on what model you use. This is the one that I've developed over the years based on the Iowa State data. The next 12 months, just $1.37 is all that's in there. Now, that number has been extremely volatile. It was $7 back in the spring. It was minus $9 at World Pork Expo. It's been as high as $5 or $6 between now and then. It's been bumping around $0 to $3 per head for some time. That's not the kind of numbers that would engender a lot of expansion. I don't think we're going to have a lot of expansion here in the short term, short of the Cargill move in Texas. That one's not driven by this year's profits. That's a long-term strategic decision on their part to try to supply more of their own pigs. But still, not a bad situation for pork producers, but not a great one. I think those that manage margins really effectively, the futures markets are giving them chances to beat these numbers. These numbers are hand-to-mouth on feed, hand-to-mouth on marketing pigs. It's strict cash buy, cash sell. You can do better than that if you're managing your risk, and I would certainly encourage you to be doing that. Canada, of course, they've gone through a long downturn. This is year-over-year reductions, and you can see they haven't had a positive quarter in there since back the first quarter of 2006, I believe. They're going to be very close to zero when their numbers come out for July 1. They'll be published August 22nd. So that's going to put the North American herd kind of at a stable situation relative to a year ago. I think we're going to see that remain. I was in Canada last week. They're not doing badly. They're not doing great. But anytime, the real driver there has been the appreciation of the Canadian dollar. And had it not been for the recession, which caused this spike, a reduction in the Canadian dollar, increase in the U.S. dollar, we would have spent about 4 years here right around par. And I don't see that changing anytime soon, as much oil as we bring in from Canada and the country's relative policies. Here's the changes that I had on slaughter. These are my forecasts in the right column. I put 3 others up here just for your comparisons. A little higher on third quarter slaughter, a little lower on the fourth quarter. We could have reductions in weights that could tighten those supplies. I think we will have reductions in weights that will take maybe 1% off of those from a production standpoint. I got growth in the first quarter of next year. The other analysts don't agree with me on that one, but I've got a little bit of growth coming, mainly due to productivity. These were our forecasts coming out of the June Hogs and Pigs report, and I do not change those normally during a quarter. I put them up there and then say, okay, let's talk about what's changed. Well, you can see where the futures were day before yesterday, much higher than where we are. And the futures, in my opinion, are trading much higher demand than what we had assumed at the time. And I would say that given the developments with Chinese buying interest and the Koreans' re-entry into the market to some degree, that's a safe thing. The demand is, in fact, stronger than what we had factored in these price forecasts. Is it as strong as what the futures have? I don't think so. I think the futures are still offering some awfully good pricing opportunities, and there's quite a bit of margin in most of these future prices out there that I would encourage the producers to really look at. Okay, that's that. Let's talk about factors that kind of are a little, to me, key for the next 2 or 3 years. Well, the first one is this, and you talked with Wes last night. You're going to talk with Charlie after a while with a lot of issues that are going around that might have an impact on the level of domestic meat and poultry demand. But we have to remember, what's going to happen out of this latest debacle on the future, on the equity markets. I put this out there for 2 reasons. One, to show the drop we've had this week, but also to show that we're not anywhere near as bad off on the equity markets as we were just a few years ago. Now, we could get there again, I suppose, but it hasn't been